Dear Dhamma friends, we have come to the second Dhamma sermon of this English medium retreat. May you give your consent by saying Sadhu Sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Attime bhikkave dhamma bhavita bahuli kata apara parangamanaya samvattanti iti. Dear Dhamma friends, as you all could remember that we have taken Parangama Sutta as the topic of this series of retreats, and we were discussing Noble Eightfold Path according to this sutta. Actually, Buddha mentions that if one develops these 8 factors, one would be able to cross from this shore to the other shore, from this bank to the other bank. So therefore, understanding this Noble Eightfold Path is quite important, and we are going through one by one. And Buddha mentions particularly that one has to establish oneself in the correct view, and then it becomes the forerunner of the whole path. So Sammaditthi becomes the forerunner of the whole path because it gives us the direction where to move. So therefore, understanding Sammaditthi is quite important, quite critical. So therefore, we spend fair amount of time in discussing Sammaditthi. So as I said, it is twofold: the mundane type and the supramundane type. And then if one establish oneself in the proper side or correct view, Sammaditthi, then all the thinking will become according to that correct view. So therefore, it is very crucial to have proper understanding or the proper view, proper direction, because all our actions, all our thought patterns will be conditioned by that thinking, that view, that perspective what we have taken. Now, in that sense, Buddha mentions Kanhan Dhammang Vipahaya Sukham Bhaveta Pandito Oka Anokang Agamma Viveke Atta Duramang. So what he says there, so we have to neglect or we have to discard all the wrongdoing or wrong activities, unwholesome deeds, and Sukhang Bhaveta, where we have to develop this wholesome side. We have to develop the wholesome deeds, wholesome words and wholesome thoughts, and then Oka Anokang Agamma Viveke Yatta Duramang. So it has some deeper meaning where when one renunciate, especially mentioning about the monks and nuns, when one renunciate, leaving aside the household life, so one has to find happiness in this renunciant life. One has to find happiness in this viveka, in this sort of equanimous mode. So actually it is not only related to the monks and nuns, even as yogis, even as meditators, we sometimes have to adhere to this principle. Because when our minds are intends to think something very beautiful, something very attractive, still we have to bring it back to very ordinary, very neutral kind of object. So that therefore whole meditation technique is very much like a renunciation. Because when the mind or the defilements or the craving is asking us to think about something very attractive, think about the past, think about the future, it may be very delighting, but still we have to renunciate that, we have to let it go and come back to a very neutral type of object. So therefore, then and there the renunciation has to happen. And today we actually have to discuss about the second path factor, that is the Samma Sankappa. So yesterday we discussed the opposite side, that is the Miccha Sankappa. So the wrong thoughts or wrong intentions. So Buddha mentioned that there are 3 wrong intentions, namely Kama Sankappa, Vyapada Sankappa, Vihinsa Sankappa. Kama Sankappa means sensual thoughts, sensual intentions, sensual desires. And then Vyapada Sankappa means ill will. And then Vihinsa Sankappa means thinking harm towards another person. Now the opposite is the Samma Sankappa, that is the Nekkamma Sankappa, the opposite of Kama Sankappa. Instead of having sensual thoughts, greed, craving, so one has to have the renunciation as the opposite of it. And then instead of having Vihinsa Sankappa, ill will, one has to the opposite, that is the good will towards another person. And instead of having Vihinsa Sankappa, harmful thoughts towards another person, one has to have some compassionate thoughts, harmless thoughts. So therefore, we need to recognize these two sides. And actually Buddha himself, before he became enlightened, he himself has practiced by dividing these two categories. So he clearly mentions this in Dedahavitaka Sutta, comes in Majjhima Nikaya. He says that before his enlightenment, he understood that there are various thoughts coming to his mind. Some are beneficial, some are not beneficial. And he mentioned what he did. He divided all types of these thoughts into two groups. One into wholesome group and the other into the unwholesome group. Wholesome group has the Nekkamma Sankappa, Avihinsa Sankappa, Avyapada Sankappa. And the unwholesome group has the Kama Sankappa, Vihinsa Sankappa and Vyapada Sankappa. So whenever a thought occurs in his mind, so he understood, okay, this belongs to the Kama Sankappa, so he immediately put it to one side. Then another thought arises, assume that belongs to Avihinsa Sankappa, so he put it to the other side. So likewise, he is analyzing his thoughts without being caught to them. So that is the beauty. So if we are able to recognize them, okay, this belongs to this category, that belongs to another category. So we are categorizing rather than being caught to its content. So that's again a good practice where we are simply recognizing the tone of it or the content of it, not being caught to them. We are simply putting to different buckets, different bins. So he mentioned there all these negative thoughts, all these unwholesome thoughts are harmful to himself, harmful to others, and harmful to both sides. Not only that, he mentions that they are destroying the already developed concentration or developed wisdom. It's harmful to wisdom. They actually contaminates the wisdom. They destroys the wisdom. Panya nirodhiko. And then anibbana samvattiniko. Instead of healing the mind, instead of cooling the mind, instead of calming down the mind, these wrong types of thinking will burn the mind. So therefore he understood, okay, it is not relevant to Nibbana, it's not conducive to Nibbana, instead it is more opposite of it. So therefore he understood, so thinking about these Kama Sankappa, sensual thoughts, sensual desires, and thinking in line with ill will, and thinking into the harm towards another, actually harm himself. Harm whoever thinking like that. So therefore he understood that, and once he understood the drawbacks in this type of wrong thinking, slowly he was able to reduce that. And he has used the opposite, that is the wholesome side, to replace this unwholesome side. So that is what sometimes we do. Say when we have a lot of lustful thoughts in our mind, probably we can get into the other side, that is the Asubha Sanya, or we develop Asubha Bhavana. We think about the loathsomeness of the body. So therefore we are replacing this lustful thoughts with the other side, that is seeing the loathsomeness of the body. So slowly these lustful thoughts will diminish, will disappear. On the other hand, if our minds are fettered with hatred, probably we can practice metta, loving kindness. So that will help to bring back to the equanimity, where you are able to overcome these hatredful thoughts, ill will, and then slowly replacing that with metta, replacing that with loving kindness. So these are typical practices one can get involved with, because immediately we can't get into, sometimes we can't get into the more profound stages. So we have to deal from where we are. So Asubha Bhavana, Metta Bhavana, Marananussati, all actually helps depending on where we are. So these are all in a way kind of tools which are very helpful during our spiritual path. So when our mind is extremely lustful, rather than get into Anapanasati, doing some sort of Asubha Bhavana definitely might help to bring it back to the equanimity. On the other hand, if mind is extremely hateful, angry, then rather than get into Anapanasati, one can practice little amount of metta. So again, the mind will calm down. So therefore, Buddha mentions in this Dvedavitaka Sutta that he himself understood these two categories, and accordingly he has categorized thoughts, and was quite helpful for him to reduce this unwholesome side and to increase the wholesome side. There's a very beautiful saying Buddha mentions there. Even when he is thinking the wholesome side continuously, it is not that harmful. So, say for example, if one thinks more and more about renunciant thoughts, more and more about metta, loving kindness, more and more kind of compassionate thoughts, it's not harmful to himself or to another person. But there is a drawback, because this involves fair amount of mind activity. So you need to think, again and again thinking. And he understood in the long run, when he's thinking again and again, even the wholesome thoughts, so his body becomes little faintish. He feels tired. So as a result, the concentration reduces. Concentration go far away. So it's difficult to concentrate the mind now because of too much thinking. So what he did was simply calm down later even the wholesome thinking, and simply kept his mind inside the body. He beautifully mentions there, Ajjattameva chintang santapemi sannisademi ekodin karomi samadhami. So what ultimately he did was, actually, in order to replace unwholesome side, he has used the wholesome thinking. And once he has established himself in the wholesome thinking, later that also has slowly reduced. And ultimately came to some sort of a silent mind, where almost no thinking going to happen. So mind has well established within the body, well established within himself, and very calm, very quiet. So this actually we may be practicing in our meditation. Say for example, while in walking meditation, so there may be various thoughts coming to your mind. So instead of allowing your mind to be carried away with them, you are simply bringing it back to your body. You may be even using a word to emphasize it. You may be simply telling, okay, this is right, this is left, this is right, this is left. So likewise, you may be using this labeling. That too itself is a vitakka, sankappa, and it is quite helpful, because it helps to discard all this vicious thinking, cut off that vicious thinking, and bring your attention to then and there to this ongoing process. And ultimately, you can even stop this kind of labeling or noting and simply do the job quietly with a very silent mind. That would be the most useful and most quietening, and then you feel like the burden has kept aside. So mind is very quiet, and simply then every step you can be utterly mindful with a very quiet mind. So you don't need to struggle now, because mind has really tamed. Kind of a quiet mind is available. So this quiet mind is being kept each and every step. Very, very soft, kind of a gentle, very quiet, and therefore the meditation becomes fairly smooth. So then actually you can go to the next step of looking more details about the foot, or more details about the breath or rising and falling, whatever the object. So that means the concentrated mind. That means the mind has well established mindfulness now. Now, when we think about Samma Sankappa, that too Buddha mentions it is twofold. So the first one is the mundane side, as very much like the Samadhitti, which is twofold, mundane side and supramundane side. Similarly, Samma Sankappa also has two sides, mundane side and the supramundane side. So mundane side, Buddha says, Sasava Punya Bhagya Upadi Vepakka. So it is tainted. It still has some ignorance into the person who is thinking. It may be wholesome thinking. It may be the renunciant thinking according to the renunciation, that you are thinking to give up things, to let go things, to donate things. Not necessary to be Nissarana, but to donate something, to give someone. So that is the Nekkhamma Sankappa. On the other hand, maybe thinking of metta, so still some ignorance is involved, that you are wishing yourself goodwill. Okay, may I be happy, may I be well, may I be healthy, may I be wealthy. So some ignorance is included, but punya bhagya, it has some, it is actually making a lot of merit, and it is intentional. And again, now assume that you are spreading metta towards another person, may to your teacher, may to your whoever, your children, husband, brother, whoever. Likewise, so then it still has some amount of ignorance included, but makes a lot of merit. And again, you are spreading metta towards all the beings, all the human beings, all the devas, and all these whoever. A lot of merits is included. You can accumulate a lot of merit, but some ignorance is also there. Upadi Vepakka, so it gives you good results. So assume that you are developing very good metta, you are very talented in developing metta, and even come to the very maximum limit, and it gives you a lot of benefits. Like Metta Nisansa Sutta mentions, like you can sleep well, you can wake up well, the devas will protect you, no harm will come from fire, poison, and your mind get concentrated, and ultimately, if not attained, you can be reborn in the Brahma realm. And similarly, there may be other lot of benefits, like you may be born with the celestial realms, and even in the human realms with a lot of wealth and all. So likewise, a lot of such benefits are there. Upadi Vepakka. So all these assets are possible coming on your way because of this kind of practice. Now this, the mundane side of thinking, therefore is useful. It is not, we can't simply discard it. It has benefits. And on the other hand, how we get caught to unwholesome side of thinking, that has also the opposite side of very, say, dramatic consequences, very strong consequences, because we become kind of victims to our own thinking. So we begin it as a very innocent kind of way, but slowly the thinking catches its momentum and we become slaves to this thinking. So that is the bad side of it. So that is especially in wrong thinking. So this we have to be very careful, because at the beginning it appears like it happens in a passive manner. We are not get much involved. But slowly it becomes interesting, so our attention being drawn to it, we are also now little slowly participate into this thinking. So ultimately, so thinking happens by itself. Even we want to stop it, we can't stop. So this very beautifully explained in Madhupindika Sutta, the kind of the intricacies in this thinking. So there, Venerable Mahakachana explains the finer details of how this thinking happens. So he says, Chakkunchauso paticca rupecha uppajjati chakku viññānam. Very subtle level. So when eye contacts with a form, then the chakku viññāna, the eye consciousness happens. So the consciousness arises, telling, okay, there is eye and there is I, EYE, and then the form. And then Tinnan Sangati Passo. So all three coming together is called contact. Then Passa Pacchaya Vedana. Because of contact, feeling arises. Assume it may be a pleasurable feeling. Then the feeling is there. Yang Vedeti Sang Sanjanati. And as you feel, you recognize or you perceive. Okay, he's a person, he's a child, he's a man, he's a woman, he's beautiful, he's likewise some sort of a perception going to arise. Yang sanjanati tang vitakketi. And once perception happens, accordingly there's a thought. Now the machine starts. There's a thought going to arise. Yang tang vitakketi. Yang vitakketi tam papancheti. Now slowly we contribute to this thinking. So far it happens in a very innocent manner. It's a kind of a causal reaction. We can't stop it. Actually it is beyond our control. It happened. As a result of eye contacted the form, the eye consciousness arise. And all three are the contact. Everything is present now. Now the feeling is there. So we can't stop that. Feeling happens. Now, when the feeling happens, we perceive. So that may be something now we recognize. So accordingly, we start to think. And that is the area now probably we can try to stop. But that requires fair amount of practice. But for a typical person, that is beyond his capacity. Now the thinking starts. Now, when it starts, assume that this thought gives him some pleasure. Now he adds another thought. It produces more pleasure. He adds another thought. So likewise, we slowly fabricate this thinking. We slowly fertilize this thinking. Now this thinking grows. Now he is adding more stories, more different types of thinking get added to this whole process. And ultimately what happens is, that's beautifully mentioned here, yang vitakketi tam papancheti. Now it is coming to the mental proliferation. So it reaches to a level, now it is going beyond the typical norms. So different thought patterns are now arising by themselves because of our own past habits. Now too much thinking going on different directions. There is no proper direction. There is no proper aim in this thinking now. Thinking in different sides in ad hoc manner. Ultimately, yam papancheti tato nidanang purisang papancha sanya sankha samudacharanti atita anagata pachuppannesu chakku viññayesu rupesu. So that means now this person who got involved in this thinking get caught to his own this whole mental proliferation. This whole mental proliferation is capable of kind of beset this person. Now he is under this whole thinking. This thinking itself besets the person who started to think. Now he is no more capable of controlling it. He becomes a victim of this thinking. Now this happens related to the eye, related to the ear, related to the nose, to the tongue, to the body, and even to the mental objects. All 6 senses this can happen. Once we see something, this kind of a mental proliferation can ignite. When we hear something, this kind of mental proliferation can happen. When we taste something, it can happen. When we smell something, it can happen. When we go through some sensations, it can happen. Touching sensation, it can happen. And even if a mental image comes to the mind, it can happen. Because this sanya becomes the root cause of this mental proliferation. Sanya nidanahi papancha sankha. So this gives a kind of a help us to understand this whole phenomena, whole story, how beautifully, or can't say it is beautiful, how in a very interwoven manner, how these things are helping each other. Ultimately, we become victims of this whole process. So when we understand that, so we have to develop mindfulness if we want to be free from this vicious thinking. So mindfulness becomes the kind of a dam which can stop this kind of mental proliferation. Immediately when one establishes in mindfulness, it gives a kind of a break. So it assumes like there's a whole flood of thinking happens, flooding of thoughts happen. So when we establish in mindfulness, boom, there's a kind of a big kind of a stopping or kind of a breakage of this flow happens. Assume you are capable of making such breaks again and again to this flow. Then slowly, so this whole flow fades away. This weakens. This whole flow starts to weaken. So that's why, as beginners in our practice, so we are starting with a lot of thinking, too much thinking. Today we are obsessed with thinking. Now, but when we are established mindfulness, then and there, it is not continuous mindfulness, but then and there, assume that mind drifts, again you bring it back. Again mind distracts, again you bring it back. So this tendency, this bad habit now breaks then and there. So slowly this frequency increases. Now you are breaking this habit, you are breaking this flow more frequently. Ultimately, this fairly fades away. Now only you will be understand, okay, there's a quiet mind, possible, not impossible. It is possible to stop this whole inner chatter. So then you will understand how simple it is, how quiet it is, and how light it is. So far I was thinking it has become a real burden. But now only I understood there's a mind capable of not thinking. Sometimes people misunderstand that thinking, so that is some sort of unconscious or unperceivable. So you become a percipient being. It is not like that. It is not an asanya sattva while being in this human realm. So one establish mindfulness and it's a kind of a quiet mind. So you have pure awareness. In this awareness you know everything but no thinking. No commentary is needed. So you can simply reduce the volume to 0, simply watch the match. Something like that. So then there is no commentator. So he does not give his own biased ideas, but you can judge on your own whether the wicket is true or whether umpire has made some biased decision. So likewise. So therefore, when you are observing something, if you can maintain a very quiet mind, then only you can really enjoy it. Otherwise, always various thinking patterns, thoughts are coming and giving its own comments without allowing us to really enjoy the picture. Without allowing us to really observe what's really going on. That's why in meditation, we need to reach this stage. We need to come to the stage where our mind is quiet and simply observing. Very quiet mind, very concentrated mind, simple mind, observing what is going on. Then only we will get the correct picture. Otherwise, we will get a biased picture according to our likes and dislikes. Now, so when we are thinking and getting to the other side, so that is supramundane side. So there Buddha mentions takko, vitakko, sankappo, appana, vyappana, chetaso, abhiniropana, vaci sankharo. There are different subtle forms of thinking, we can say. Can't say it is thinking. Very subtle form of applied mind is mentioned. Now, if one understand the drawbacks of this unwholesome thinking. So he may try his best to minimize unwholesome thinking. Now, whenever kama sankappa happens, so he recognizes, okay, this is a kama chanda, this is a sensual thought. And then he allow it to fade away rather than promoting it. When ill will happens, so he able to understand it. And then he allows it to fade away. So that becomes chittanupassana. That becomes dhammanupassana. Say for example, you are practicing chittanupassana, then you are able to recognize when angry mind arises. Sadosan chittanti pajanati, where you know it is an angry mind now. It's an angry consciousness. You are no more a victim of it, but you are an outsider. You are very mindful. So mindfulness helps us to see that mind objectively. It is no more your mind. It is simply a mind rooted with dosa, rooted with hatred. Now you, as a second person, now you are able to look at it. Since you are not promoting it, since you are not fertilizing it, it starts to fade away. And therefore you can understand, okay, there's a angry mind arise and then it is passing away. Similarly, suppose there's a lustful mind arise. So you are capable of understanding it. So some angry or lustful mind has arisen. So you are able to come out of it, look at it objectively, and it will fade away. So if you continue to practice like this, then there's a possibility you can have an empty mind even, where the mind becomes free from thinking, free from thoughts, and even that mind is not established even in the body, even in the feelings. So mind is fairly free. On such situation, if you are capable of having such situation, assume then another thought comes. Now this is the very beginning of this thought. This is the very inception of this thought. Now only you can see the whole picture. So Buddha says in the Dhammanupassana section, in the hindrance part, when there is no kamacchanda, asantang va ajjattang kamachandang nattime ajjattang kamachandoti pajanati. When there is no lust, no sensual desire, the yogi knows there is no sensual desire. His mind is free. Santang va ajjattang kamachandang attime ajjattang kamachandoti pajanati. When there is lust, he knows there is lust. It is not his lust, it is not her lust, it is lust. Seeing pure objectivity. And more refined state, he is mentioned, anuppannasa kamachandasa uppado hoti tancha pajanati. When kamachanda, when the lustful thought arises, he knows that now it is arising. It was not there, now it is arising. Now you can see the clarity of the mind the yogi is maintaining. So there was a pure mind, there's a very quiet mind. In that quiet platform, now this pops up. This lustful thought pops up. So this popping up being noticed by the yogi. So that's the beginning of the thought. Then uppannasa kamachandasa pahino hoti tancha pajanati. So when he is capable of seeing the very inception of this thought, now he is not promoting it, it is just a lustful thought. So it can't sustain itself, it can't sustain by itself. So without having the strength coming from this vicious thinking. So if you are not adding to it, if you are not promoting it, if you are not fabricating it, if you are not making it mine, then it can't sustain. From where it gets the energy? So it can't sustain, so it will simply burns away. It will simply fades away. Uppannasa kamachandasa pahino hoti tancha pajana. So the yogi understand, okay, this arisen lust has now gone. Since he has properly attended to it, properly investigated it, properly operated on it, then there is a possibility for a certain time period there is no lust. Pahinasa kamachandasa ayating anuppado hoti tancha pajanati. For quite a while there is no lust. So similarly, likewise, you can look at anger. You can look at the restlessness. You can look at regrets in the mind. And you can even look at various doubts in the mind. So now you are no more promoting doubts, but rather you look at doubt as doubt. Look at restlessness as restlessness. You are not being agitated because of restlessness. You are not asking concentration at that time. You are not wishing concentration, but understood, okay, now the mind is restless. That's it. So if you understood that, so then it can't maintain that restlessness. You are not fertilizing it. So the typical result is it will settle. Because it was shaking due to some reason. Now you are not promoting it. You understood it is shaky. So because of that, it can't have energy for this vibration. So natural effect is it will settle. So likewise, these defilements, these hindrances becomes kind of a fertilizer for our own practice. So that is Dhammanupassana, where you can look at all these hindrances as objects of your meditation. And so that is where the yogi will slowly understand the mechanisms of the mind. So he will understand how the mind is working. More and more he becomes vigilant about his mind. From the beginning, from the waking up moment till he goes to bed. So he is now watching the mind. What is happening in the mind? How mind is reacting? When I am talking with someone, how mind is reacting? When I am doing some activity, how mind is reacting? When you are, say, watching the TV, how mind is reacting? When you are reading a newspaper, how mind is reacting? So we have to go through all these things and we need to understand how mind is reacting to these things. Are the defilements growing or are the defilements reducing? Are the mind become cluttered or is the mind become spacious? So likewise, we become kind of silent observer about ourselves. So then we will understand very well about ourselves, where we stand. Are we progressing? What we do is really conducive to the progress, or are we going in the wrong direction? On the other hand, if we are able to look at the source of these things, then we are promoting yoniso manasikara. Because Samma Sankappa has quite link with yoniso manasikara. Because now we have gone away from the surface level, but has gone fairly deep, fairly source level, fairly to the root level. Typically, when we see something, our untrained mind stops at the surface. We simply see the beauty. We simply see the shape. We simply see the color. Whatever in the frame in ourselves, so we are catching that frames. If it is according to the frame, we immediately get happy. If it is opposite to the frame, then we get unhappy. So because we saw only the surface. So that is the ayoniso manasikara. But yoniso manasikara help us to penetrate, help us to go deeper and see the reality, see the truth, or see the more subtle details available in whatever the phenomena. So that is where taking us to actually to this causality, where how this operation whole happens, how this thinking starts. So then you are actually going to more deeper aspects of Dhamma. Assume one is developing Dhammanupassana. Say he might able to understand. So when there is ignorance, there's a quite chance to fabrication, quite a chance to add more, to put a lot of our likes and dislikes, to cover it up. So then more thinking going to happen. Then the mind going to establish well, because now thinking is going on. Now you start another machine, another world. So the consciousness will establish there. So then the whole film starts. It was no film at that time previously. It was a very just empty frame, empty screen. Now the image came and you start to put some sugar to it, put some butter to it, put some jam to it. Now it starts to taste better. you put more and more. Now the Nama Rupa going to manifest. Nama Rupa going to grow. Now it's enough for the consciousness to establish. So Vijnana Pacca Nama Rupang, Nama Rupacca Salayatanam. Now it is very beautiful. Now your eyes become open. Even your mouth becomes open. Because the picture is very beautiful. So we are very excited. Watching the TV, watching the movie. Now the Salayatana comes to the picture. Salayatana Pacca Passo, now more and more contact going to happen. More and more contact. The sounds are hitting the ears. The frames of different pictures are hitting the eyes. So the whole picture now with its high level. Passa Pacca Vedana. Now a lot of pleasurable feelings. Vedana Pacca Tanha. Now you are more craving. What happens next? What would be the next phenomena? What would be the next slide? So a lot of eager craving. Tanha Pacca Upadana. Now you are clung to it very strongly. A lot of grasping. And now you are in a movie world. Disney world. Now you are reborn in Disney world. So Disney world can't last. It lasts only maximum 1 hour. If you want to be there for 2 hours, you have to pay more. And so that also fades away. It will decay and you will come back to the typical boredom. So that is the Jati Jara Marana. So the whole Patisamuppada becomes fairly understandable. To different phenomena, you can apply it. It is, you don't need to wait for long time, but how our mind get deluded. So each and every such incident, you can apply this Patisamuppada. You can look at this, how we very quickly underwent all this process. So we have some ignorance. Because of that we did the fabrications. So it helps to establish consciousness. As a result, the name and form, the various other gadgets come into the picture. A lot of thinking now starts. A lot of images, mental images, feelings going to happen. It helps more to other sense bases to start operating. Eyes, ears, tongue, all these things. Now, as a result, they get sense impingement. Other forms and the sounds and all these things going to start. So likewise, the whole machine's now catching its momentum. So it's a kind of a vicious cycle. Ultimately, we are reborn in a different world. We lost the present moment. So we were in the present moment in that sense. We were in a very pure state, but we lost it now. We are reborn in a different state. That's a bhava. So that's another world in that sense. So that can't last, is very fragile, ultimately it will collapse. So likewise we can understand how this Patisamuppada, the principle of causality, going to operate in our lives. So more and more we understand that, slowly, our thinking very much stop going too far. As I said before, we were writing novels, now we may be writing only short stories. Maybe later we may simply send SMS. No, not even letters, just SMS. And ultimately SMS becomes slowly, mindfully, silently. No more typical SMS. Now you give prominence to mindfulness. Things happen very slowly. Mind becomes very silent, very calm. You are very quiet. So therefore, the whole paradigm shift in that sense. How we were thinking, how we were reacting, how we were desiring to various things, everything shifts. Now in a different world, almost like. Very much like a different world. So therefore, assume that one becomes a noble. Then Buddha says the supramundane type of vitakka, supramundane type of samma sankappa. So this noble person has beautiful qualities. So there's a beautiful quality, he is called Anavila Sankappo. So Anavila Sankappo means he further purifies in case if his mind gets Kama Sankappa, that is lustful thoughts, so he is trying to fade it away. Buddha mentioned in Ariyavasa Sutta, Anavila Sankappo, Kama Sankappo Pahino Hoti. Slowly all these sensual thoughts fades away. Vyapada Sankappo Pahino Hoti. Ill will thoughts fades away. Vihinsa Sankappo Pahino Hoti. All harmful thoughts fades away. So he is maintaining very pure mind. Basically he understood the consequences of inner burning. So it's very vicious. I mean, he may feel it. The noble person may be feeling it. Accordingly, he is trying to keep a cool mind. Because why burn? So all these Kama Sankappa, Vyapada Sankappa, Vihinta Sankappa are burning to the mind. So he is trying to cool himself, calm down himself, tranquilize himself. So in order to tranquilize, in order to calm down, he is not promoting this type of wrong thinking, unwholesome thinking. So Buddha says, to this kind of wrong thinking, whenever Kama Sankappa happens, so he is trying to put it aside, let it go, and push it away. So that becomes kind of an effort. Whenever wrong Kama Sankappa, Vyapada Sankappa, Vihinsa Sankappa happens, he doesn't going to tolerate it. Doesn't going to encourage it. Rather trying to let it go and keep a pure mind. So, and the mind now become very refined, and therefore Buddha says, vitakko. Now that is not the typical Vyapada vitak and all these things, bad side, but a very subtle applied mind, where his mind can be applied to various objects without thinking. Say he may be looking at things, mind is applied to various objects, but mind is silent. No thinking, but mind applied to various objects. So you can understand the shift. Previously we were thinking and doing all things. That's the very gross form of Sankappa. But now it has become very subtle vitakka. Vitakka means applied mind, where your mind can be applied to an object. So that is necessary in meditation. Say for example, if you want to attain jhana, say your mind has to be again and again applied on the, say at the beginning to the breath. So your mind can be applied onto breath, but mind is quiet. And again when you are doing it, so vitakka become prominent. And then mind can be assumed that you may be even get a nimitta. Anapanasati nimitta is there, concentration sign is there. Now even the mind can be applied to that nimitta. Now beautiful sign is available, light sign is available. So the mind being applied to that again and again. So vitakka is available. And mind being behaving on top of it. So simply like touching the object, touching this sign. So the vichara is there. And the mind is not wavering. It's not drifting here and there, not going to any other thing. Just very much like locked in this object. So since there is no shifting, there is no defilements, rather very concentrated mind, so the ekaggata is there. Now the mind is fairly locked there, concentrated there. Ekaggata is there. So when ekaggata is there, it is completely opposite to lust. You can't have lust with ekaggata. So when the mind is well established, no lust. So your mind established on a very pure object, fairly, can't say pure, maybe say fairly undefiled object. It's just a sign. So its mind is established there. Applied mind is available, sustained mind is available, concentration is available, vitakka, vichara, and then sometimes the piti can arise, the rapture can arise. And the pleasant kind of a tranquility, the sukha, the pleasurable feelings, not the feelings, say sukha, the kind of happiness, subtle form of happiness is available. So if these 5 factors are present, so that is the typical first jhana. So likewise, the mind can even, this is achievable even to a mundane person. It doesn't need to necessarily to be noble. Mundane people, the typical putajjana still can attain jhanas. It's not necessary to be a noble person. So anyway, so the mind become very accurate, very subtle, and this subtle form of vitakka is there. So likewise, Buddha mentioned vitakko sankappo appana vyappana cetaso abhiniropana vaci sankharo. So now the yogi understood there's a possibility just applying the mind with a quiet background. And if necessary, he can fix the mind onto any particular object. So he has come to some sort of mastery in his thinking. So therefore, typically related to the arahants, it is mentioned that they have the capacity even to, if something kind of loathsome being seen, if necessary, he can have a loathsome attitude. If necessary, he can have even happy attitude. So likewise, he has mastered his mind, mastered his thinking. And on the other hand, so Buddha mentions us in the path. So when one has the capacity, so in case if mind comes to the extremes, say due to some appearance, due to some sort of vision, assume that mind drifts to the happiness. So Buddha recommends bring it back to the middle. Again, if mind drifts to the opposite, to the negativity, so again Buddha recommends bring it back to the middle. So likewise, this equanimity becomes one's comfort zone. So where mind being maintained on this fairly neutral, fairly equanimous, spacious, unattached state. So ultimately, and Buddha says in Indriya Bhavana Sutta, when a noble person, even because of his still available defilements, even if his mind drifts to extremes, maybe it drifts to the happiness, maybe it drifts to the negativity, now he doesn't need to apply a lot of technical facilities or technical skills. Immediately, Buddha says, so he's having attiyati harayati jugucchati, where Buddha mentions, okay, he simply have a kind of shame. Still it has gone to this side. Like an immediate reaction, not reaction, maybe immediate understanding. Even though I have tried this much, even though the mind has well established on this equanimity, kind of purity, still this guy has again gone. So he shames about it. So as a result, it comes back and stays at home. So likewise, Buddha mentioned the kind of practice. So to what level he mentioned is beautiful. Actually, the speed, you might have heard about it. So if the mind has shifted, when you see something, if the mind has gone to extreme, Buddha says the good practitioner brings it back to the middle like an eye blink. Within an eye blink, he is there. When, because of a sound, if the mind shifts to the extreme, with the sound of this, I don't know, what is it? Flash. Finger flip, right? So it is bring back to the equanimity. Similarly, because of a smell, if it shift, again very quickly he is established again in the middle. Similarly, because of a taste, it is shift. It is like a split, right? Spit. You spit, it is again back in the middle. Similarly, if because of a sensation, because of a touching sensation, if the mind is shift to the extremes, he is bringing it back like this, stretching or bending that quickly. And similarly, when a thought happens in the mind, because of that, if the mind drifts, He's bringing it back like he's giving another simile where if a hot burn iron, when you put a droplet of water, immediately it vaporize. Similar, such easily he brings it back. You can understand what kind. I mean, we need to practice. It is these things not happen just by theory. These things may not happen just merely by understanding. We simply have to apply our mind then and there when mind shifts. That is how we need to operate. So when we have to allow mind to play, and we need to understand, okay, now the guy has gone to the upper side, okay, let me come back to the middle. If it has gone to the negative side, okay, I understood the person is really mindful, so his task is to bring it to the middle. So likewise, the middle region becomes the path, middle path. So middle path is actually another name for the Noble Eightfold Path. In a way, very beautifully, Buddha has mentioned these things. So the whole practice becomes very practical then. So it's a completely a pragmatic path. It is not just a theoretical path, dogmatic path. Rather, it's a very beautiful practical path. So if we are able to practice this path, so that's why Buddha mentioned, so one is able to cross from this shore to the other shore. It is quite, I mean, we can understand, we can believe it may be possible. Because it has very, proving possibility that if one is operating like this, his own defilements he can see, and later he is seeing them objectively, and now he is again and again bringing his back to the purity, bringing it back to the freedom. So ultimately the mind becomes free. It's possible. So likewise we can understand Buddha is giving us a very beautiful path which is based on practice. So let's decide to practice hard. So with that final note, I'll wind up today's Dhamma sermon. Thank you very much for attentive listening.